It all starts here. Whatever plans you have for your horse, it all starts here when he is a foal. Handling him as a foal is embarking on a very important part of the horse's overall education. This is where it all begins. This is where you can start him on the road towards cooperating with you, towards trying for you. And remember, whatever you put the young horse through now, you'll never forget it, whether it was good or whether it was bad. You can't expect him to have a bad experience now and forget it later on. The lessons the foal is given now are directly linked to his ultimate future. The handling he is given now will influence his entire life. Up to now, the foal has depended on his mother for almost everything. He's relied on her for nourishment. He's looked to her for protection when he was worried. He's depended on her for leadership whenever he has been in doubt. In the ways in which she can care for her foal, however, the mare is limited. She can't trim his feet, treat him for worms, or stitch up a cut. As a breeder of horses, this responsibility is yours. You have to handle your horses. You have to care for them. Whether you want a horse for dressage, showing, working cattle, pony for the kids, or just to ride around. These first lessons as a foal are a vitally important part of his overall education. When you set out to handle a horse, the first and most basic thing to remember is that a horse is just a horse. Some are nervous and highly strung, others are self-confident and relaxed. There are no good horses or bad horses. They may have been taught good habits or bad habits, but the horses themselves are neither good nor bad. These are our human judgments. They are simply horses. Although I will mostly be talking about foals, the approach I will be illustrating in this video is valid for all horses. Whether a horse is 6 days old or 6 years old, he is still only a horse. This is no step-by-step method of handling a horse. Rather than focusing on the method or the technique itself, the important thing is why a particular approach is used and why it works. What I will be illustrating on this video relates to all horses, but if a certain method doesn't work with a particular horse, then it's up to you as a trainer to adjust that lesson to suit that horse. Remember, I'm not trying to teach a method. I'm merely trying to show you what can be achieved with any horse if we learn to understand them and see things from their point of view. A stable with good high walls is important when you wean a foal. You don't want to tempt him to try and jump out. And make sure there's nothing sticking out that he can run into and injure himself on. Plastic feeders and water drums are fine. First of all, I'll catch the mare and lead her into the stable, and the foal will follow. Then I'll take the mare away and lock the foal in. If you're weaning 2 foals, they can be put into the stable together for company. If you're only weaning 1 foal, I suggest you put another horse in the adjacent stable. It'll keep the foal from getting lonely. When his mother is taken away, the foal will become upset, so it's best to put the mother somewhere where she can neither hear nor see the foal. I'll make sure he has plenty of feed and water, and just leave him alone until he stops worrying about his mother. After a couple of days, when he's no longer anxious about the mare, I'll run him into the handling yard. Remember the importance of safe facilities when working with a young horse. Taking care to use good yards and stables can help minimise the possibility of injury. I prefer a catching pole, but if you can manage to throw a rope on without any trouble, that's fine. Remember, the foal is frightened, and the most important thing is to overcome this fear and gain his confidence. There's no question of authority or discipline. You're simply trying to help him get over his fear. I'll move the pole towards him, and as soon as he stands still, I'll move it away again. The foal will see that no harm came to him from the pole, and if he stood still for a few seconds, I removed it. Now, the next time I move towards him with the pole, he won't be expecting trouble. He'll simply stand and wait until I take it away. If I move too far or too quickly with the pole, he'll become frightened and try to run away. It's totally up to me to keep the lesson in terms the foal can understand and accept. If he starts to run around the yard, I'll position myself to stop him and again move towards him with the pole. Then, before he becomes frightened, I'll remove it. By repeating this on both sides of the horse, I'll eventually get the rope close enough to place around his neck. It's important to bring the rope from behind the foal's ears so he won't see it coming and duck his head away. As soon as the rope is in position, I'll drop it over his head in one quick movement. I have to remember, the foal is quite frightened and has no understanding of what I'm trying to do to him. I'm therefore careful not to pull on the rope or get him tangled in it. I'll remove the stick from the yard and try to get him to stop in the corner. By pulling on the rope slightly and then releasing it, I ask him to bring his head to me. It's not a fight. I simply have to remember he doesn't understand what I'm asking of him. If he tries to move away, I make things a little unpleasant by applying pressure from the rope. And as soon as his head comes towards me, I give with the rope. I want to show him that the easiest and most pleasant thing is for him just to stand and keep his head to me. Now I can move towards him a little. I move my hand along the rope and back away again before he has a chance to become frightened. He'll see that my moving towards him has caused him no trouble, and at the same distance he'll accept me again. This time I can move a little closer, but it's up to me to move away before he becomes frightened. If he decides to move away, I can make it a bit unpleasant for him by pulling on the rope. I want him to realise that the easiest thing is just to stand and keep his head to me. Always think of the rope as an aid, as a tool to help you give signals to the horse. It's not something to force or dominate him with. This time, when I approach him, he'll allow me to rub him on the neck. I'll loosen the rope and give him a good rub. I want him to see that it's pleasant to be around me. I'll move to the other side. You can't overdo the time you spend rubbing the foal around the head and neck. You have to remember the foal has a natural fear of man, and it's this fear we're trying to overcome. When I ask the foal to move this time, instead of pulling the rope, I'll make it a little unpleasant behind him by kicking a bit of sand. This will startle him, and his immediate reaction will be to jump forward. As soon as he does this, I'll go to him and rub him. He'll see the most pleasant place to be is with me. I have to remember he doesn't know what I'm trying to do, and I always have to give him the benefit of any doubt. Now I'll go to the other side and repeat the same thing, and each time he takes a step or two, I'll go to him and rub him to show him how nice it is to be near me. I'll repeat this several times. There's a very fine line between making things a little unpleasant for the horse and frightening him, so I must be careful. If the horse does become frightened, I have to remember it's me that frightened him. The horse is not at fault at all. It won't take long before the foal works out that the easiest and most pleasant option is to keep his head towards me. To prepare him for the headstall, I'll rub him behind the ears. I also want him to accept my hand rubbing his forehead, so I begin by rubbing him under the eyes. And if he starts tossing his head about, I'll try to keep my hand where it is, so he doesn't see this as a way of getting rid of my hand. When his head stops, I'll wait a few seconds and then remove my hand. He'll see I removed my hand when his head was still, and not when he was moving it. Watch carefully and you'll see the foal work out that the easiest thing for him is just to keep his head still. Each time I approach the foal now, he'll allow me to move a little further than the previous time, until eventually I can rub him on the forehead. I must always remember that whenever I go to the other side of the horse, I have to start all over again. A horse doesn't relate what happens on one side to the other side, so every lesson must be repeated on either side. Finally, the horse is confident enough to accept the headstall without any trouble. Unless there is some problem catching the foal tomorrow, the rope won't be needed again. He'll follow me immediately, just as he did with the rope. He has learned that the easy and pleasant thing is to keep his head to me. Even if I unclip the lead, the foal will still keep his head to me. Think back to the beginning of this lesson, around 20 minutes ago. Remember, we haven't won any battles. We have simply succeeded in communicating to the foal what we wanted him to do. It may become necessary to handle the foal while he's still with the mare. In that case, I'll use the mare to position the foal so I can get the rope on him easily. Then I'll remove the mare from the yard and follow the same approach as in the lesson we just finished. Some foals may become upset at being separated from the mother, so it's better if the foal can still see the mare over the fence. If the foal is nervous or highly strung, he may try to defend himself by kicking or striking. Remember, he thinks he's being threatened and is defending himself. You may not feel you are threatening him, but that doesn't mean he doesn't feel threatened by you. What we think we are doing is irrelevant. It's what the foal thinks that's important. The horse will never attack you. As far as he's concerned, he's only defending himself from a threat. It's therefore entirely up to you, the handler, to help the horse overcome his fear without making him feel threatened. If we can do this, we have eliminated the horse's urge to defend himself and to strike. After about 20 minutes, the foal has worked out that the easy and pleasant thing for him is to keep his head to me. Look at these youngsters. This is the time for them to learn about horses. Actually, they're learning and they aren't even aware of it. It's the same with the horse. The earlier he starts, the better he will be in the long term. His ultimate performance as an adult horse will be affected and influenced by these early lessons. And if he likes you and relates to you, he'll be much better off than the horse that resents humans and has been taught to fight with them. The next day, I'll run the foal back into the yard, but I have to remember, he has only had one lesson and is still a little frightened of me. If he runs away, I'll just ignore it and carry on as though nothing has happened. Never punish a horse because he is frightened. Even though the horse is following me around, he's not really moving forward. If I pull on the rope, he'll pull back. But if I use the stick to ask him to move forward, he'll immediately do so. Think of the stick as an extension of your arm. an extension that allows you to apply pressure behind the horse where it's needed. It only helps you signal the horse. It's not something to force or punish him with. If you are trying to block a horse in the yard and you are confronting him head on, his natural reaction will be to turn and run away. But if you make a noise behind him, he'll jump forward. The same principle applies here. Any pressure to move forward must come from behind the horse. You'll never be able to drag him towards you. And remember, the foal must have confidence in you. You can't expect him to move towards you if he's frightened of you. He must feel that walking towards me is part of a pleasant experience. So I'll reinforce this by reaching out and rubbing his head every time he walks towards me. When the horse grasps the idea of moving forward, I'll introduce a little pressure on the rope. I'll give a small pull and then, with the stick, ask him to walk forward. This will show him that relief from any pressure from the headstall comes from walking forward, and not from fighting and pulling back. If you pull on the headstall, the horse can't figure out that you want him to walk forward. You'll have to teach him this. I'll spend some time with him repeating this part of the lesson. As soon as the foal is in a good frame of mind and gives softly to the headstall when I ask him to move forward, it's time to move him out into the bigger yard. If there are any problems though, it will be far better to spend more time in the smaller yard and only move into the bigger yard when everything is right. There's no race to see how quickly you can take the foal out into the open. In the bigger yard, the foal's first reaction may be to think he can run away. I must be careful not to fight with him or try to pull him back. It will be very easy to pull him over. Without disciplining or frightening him, I'll just try and show him what I want. I'll go to him and rub his head, and he'll see how nice and easy it is when he keeps his head to me. And when I ask him to move, he'll immediately relate it to what happened in the smaller yard, and will be happy to try for me here as well. It's always better to underdo a lesson than to overdo one. So I'll finish this lesson now. Remember, we haven't won anything. We've simply taught the foal to cooperate. It's often said that the best thing to do with a foal is just tie him up and let him fight out his resistance. But why does he resist? Is he trying to get away? How does he see all this? It's quite simple. When he gets to the end of the rope, it pulls on his head and causes him pain, and his immediate reaction is to try and escape by pulling away. And the more he tries to pull away, the more the rope pulls on him and the more pain he is in. We have created a vicious circle the horse can't understand. If he could see the way out of his dilemma was to take a step forward, he would surely do it. But this is beyond the horse's powers of reasoning. He can't work it out. If he knew there was an easy way out, he would never put himself through all this trauma. If you tie a horse up in this manner, you are creating a fight. The horse will be frightened and will have learned to fight any pressure on the headstall. You won't be teaching him to give, you'll be teaching him to fight. Training horses is not about winning fights. It's a matter of helping a horse to become confident and cooperative. I'll begin this lesson by rubbing my hand along the horse's body, just moving it so far and back again before he becomes frightened. Next time I should be able to go a bit further. And as soon as he has accepted me on one side, I'll go to the other side and repeat the process. Remember, moving to the other side means starting all over again. The horse can't relate what happens on one side to the other. Eventually, he'll accept my rubbing him all along his body to the top of his legs. I'll rub my hand down his leg a little. If I move too quickly and make him anxious, he'll kick at me, his natural reaction to anything bothering him about his legs. There's no point in punishing a foal for being anxious or worried. But if he moves away, I'll make it a little unpleasant for him by nudging him in the ribs and maintaining a slight pressure on the headstall. He'll see it's easiest just to stand still, and as soon as he stands still, I'll rub his leg for a few seconds and then move away again. From the very beginning, I've shown the horse the way out of any unpleasantness is to bring his head to me. And you can see when my handling his legs worries him, he brings his head to me. So instead of trying to run away or kick, he sees that if he just stands and brings his head to me, no harm comes to him at all. At this stage, all I want is for the foal to accept my hand rubbing his leg. Next lesson, there will be plenty of time to pick his legs up. Whenever a horse's legs are being handled, he must feel confident the whole time. If you tie his legs with ropes or straps, you'll frighten him and create a fight. Frightening a horse and then trying to unfrighten him is not the way to make him feel confident with you. You can never tell a horse to forget that something frightened him. Good or bad, he never forgets anything you do to him. Your farrier or blacksmith doesn't want to fight with a frightened horse when he's trying to shoe him. Concentrate on gaining the foal's confidence, not on creating fights with him and then trying to win them. Now I'm going to ask the foal to walk around me instead of towards me. I'll try to show him what I want by leading him with my hand and at the same time tapping him on the rump with the stick. It's important not to expect too much at first. After he moves around, I'll go to him and rub him, just to relax him. Then I'll ask for the same thing the other way and change hands with the stick to keep the pressure to move forward behind him. Since I've taught the horse to keep his head to me, you can see his natural reaction is to bend towards me. I'll repeat the process several times. When the foal is responding well, I can turn around and change hands with the stick. As you can see, he immediately understands what's wanted of him. To keep the foal moving forward, I can now use the stick behind me. Since we don't want a one-sided horse, I'll change hands with the stick and repeat the same process on the other side. After a bit of practice, when the foal is responding well, I can move out into the bigger yard. Again, if there are any problems, it's better to remain in the small yard until everything is working smoothly. This foal, however, is responding very well, and I can now move it into the bigger yard with no trouble. It's important to keep in position at the shoulder, where the stick can be used to encourage the horse to move forward. And if the foal wants to run ahead of me, I'll stop him with a sharp pull on the headstall. Not a constant pull, but a sharp pull followed by an immediate give. As a trainer, It's your responsibility to remember the importance of teaching the horse on both sides. You must spend as much time on one side as the other. A horse can turn out to be one-sided, but it's certainly not because he was born with any disability that hindered him from moving towards the left or right. He can be taught to move better on one side than the other, and this should definitely be avoided. Always let the horse determine when the lesson should end. If you keep on going until he becomes worried or upset, he'll remember this at the next lesson, just as he'll remember if the lesson was pleasant for him. You can't tell a horse to remember one part of a lesson and forget another, so it's always better to end the lesson when a horse is still relaxed and confident, rather than stressed and confused. I like to keep lessons around 20 minutes. Sometimes they go a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. It all depends on how the horse is responding. Also, be sure to give the horse a good break between lessons, at least a couple of hours. This will give him time to settle and relax. It doesn't matter if the horse has one lesson a day, one a week, or one a month. Good or bad, he won't forget what he has been taught. No harm came to the foal last lesson, so he has no reason to fear me this time. He's happy to let me rub his legs, and I can now start asking him to let me pick his leg up. First of all, I'll just cup my hand and apply a little upward pressure. He reacts by lifting his leg. I'll hold it for a few seconds and then let it down again. He's a little worried, but instead of trying to escape, he brings his head to me. To relax him, I'll rub his head and then repeat the same process on the other side. If he tries to move away, I'll keep my hand on his leg so he doesn't see this as a way out of the situation. The front legs will generally be less of a problem, and I ask him to pick them up by gently squeezing my thumb into the cannon bone. His immediate reaction is to pick the leg up. I can hold it up for a few seconds and then let it down again. I'm not trying to hold his leg up, I'm asking the horse to pick it up for me. He's too heavy for me to hold up, so if he tries to lay his weight on me, I'll simply let go of the foot and try again. If he understands that all I want is for him to hold his leg up for a few seconds, he'll be happy to do so. But if I try and hold his leg up against his will, I'll be in for a fight. Wrestling a horse's legs is no fun. Always allow the horse the benefit of any doubt and never expect too much in any one lesson. Remember, there's always tomorrow. The foal is handling quite well in the yard at this point, so now I'll be able to move him outside with no problem. It's better to stay in the yard too long than come out too quickly. As I've said before, it's not a race. Because I want the foal to remain confident, I'll do my best to avoid frightening him in any way. First being frightened and then trying to get over it will never give you a confident horse. He'll never forget you have frightened him, just as he'll never forget you have been kind to him. I'll simply lead him around and try and keep him relaxed. When it's time for the next lesson, he won't think of me as trouble or as an experience that frightened him. I must always remember to lead the foal from either side. If we spend all our time on one side of the horse, we will simply end up with an unbalanced animal. The effective trainer must teach the horse equally on both sides.
It's important to establish a good relationship with your foal. Every time you come into the stable, bring a bit of feed and rub him around. This will make him pleased to see you and he'll get to enjoy your company.
While you're feeding the foal, never rub him around the rump. If he turns his tail to you, give him a good sharp hit with the stick. You don't want him kicking you. The secret to catching a horse is having him wanting to come to you. And the easiest way to do this is to have some feed for him. I don't mean half a slice of bread that he will snatch from your hand and run away with. I mean a good feed and a good rub. You want the horse to think, here comes that nice man with some feed for me, not, here comes that man who wants to catch me. I'll be sure to get away from him. Even when you don't want to catch the horse, you can let him eat the feed out of the bucket. It will always be easier to have the horse chase you around the paddock for his feed, rather than you chasing him. When I handle the foal's legs this time, he'll allow me to hold them a little longer. I can now also expand on the previous lesson by rubbing the inside of his leg. As you can see, I'm not holding him steady. He has learned that the easiest thing is to stand and bring his head to me. Now I'll repeat the same thing with his front legs. Just rub them so he sees having his legs handled is no big deal. Notice that each time I handle his legs, I go a little further. There's no point moving on to the next step if the foal is still anxious about the one we've just completed. Even with a horse that's been badly handled, it's still a matter of taking one step at a time. It never ever is a question of winning a struggle. When I feel the horse is handling well and is confident and cooperative, I'll find a few small obstacles that he can step over. If he has been taught well and knows that the way out of any pressure from the stick is to walk forward, this will be easy for him. Never confront the horse with an obstacle that's too hard for him. Before you try anything new with him, he must be capable of handling it. The question is not trying to find out what he can or can't do. What is important is making sure he will be able to handle anything you ask him to do. So when I ask him to step over these obstacles, I'm fairly confident he'll be able to do it. If I were worried he wouldn't be able to handle these obstacles, I'd spend more time with the lead and stick teaching him to move forward. I'm now confident I can load him into the float without any trouble. If I couldn't guide him over these simple obstacles, there'd be no point whatsoever in trying to get him into a float. The foal knows that the way out of any pressure from the stick is to walk forward towards me. The moment he does this, I'll go to him and rub his head. If he didn't take this step, I'd go to him and rub him anyway, just to show him what I wanted from him. In any case, I'll rub his head for a bit and then take him off again. He'll see it wasn't so bad staying there for a while. In fact, it was quite pleasant. So the next time I ask him to step on, he'll do it right away. Again, I'll only leave him on for a short time and then take him off. At that point, I'll walk him around for a bit just to relax him and take his mind off the float. The next time I ask him to step on the float, he'll have no reason to fear it. He'll do it without any trouble. Again, I'll rub him and make him feel good, and then take him off. Before tying the horse's head in the float, always secure him from behind. If he does decide to pull back, he'll hit his rump and jump forward again, rather than pulling on the rope and fighting for his head. When you do tie his head, always make sure the rope is long enough so he can sit on the back rail if he wants to. We don't want him to come to the end of the lead before his rump reaches the back of the float. The opposite applies when you unload the horse. Always undo the horse's head before letting the tailboard down. Otherwise, he may become frightened and pull back while he's still tied in the float. If you're having problems loading an older horse, the same principles apply. The first thing is to teach the horse to move forward with pressure from behind. You can use a long stick, as I have, or get someone behind him to apply pressure as you teach him to walk towards you. The next step is to teach him to step over a few simple obstacles. If you can't teach him to step over a few simple things, you certainly won't be able to load him. If you can get him to take one step onto the tailboard, you can rub him, relax him and take him off again. Taking him off before he gets anxious guarantees he will always step back on again. But if you try to force the horse onto the tailboard and he becomes frightened, you have given the horse a bad experience and he will always relate the float with trouble. It doesn't matter if you have to put him on and take him off 5 or 6 times. The important thing is that the horse relates the float to a pleasant experience, not as something to be feared. This horse has confidence in his handler. He sees no reason to kick because he doesn't feel frightened or threatened by his handler. This is the type of confidence we should all try and build in our horses. When I handle his legs now, the foal is very relaxed and not the least bit worried. I can hold his leg out behind him as if I were going to trim his feet, and since he's no longer worried by my handling his legs, he sees no reason to bring his head to me. He does know, however, that the easiest thing for him is to stand still, that if he does this, there'll be no problem. I'll repeat the same process with all 4 feet. I'll go around and tap the hooves, simulating the action of having his feet trimmed. Now I can expand on the previous lesson where I asked the foal to walk around me. I'll use the stick behind him to get him to move forward and lead him around with my other hand. I must be careful to keep my body just behind the line of his shoulder. If I were to step out in front of him, his natural reaction would be to stop. I'll keep just behind the line of his shoulder, and this tends to influence him to move forward. As soon as he completes a couple of circles correctly, I'll give him a rub and then repeat the same process on the other side. Please note that when I change direction, I change hands with the stick. I do this to make sure the stick stays in position behind the horse and keeps him moving forward. It's also up to me to adjust my position to the horse's movements, rather than just standing still and expecting the horse to go around me. I must remember he still doesn't know what I'm trying to teach him, and that it's up to me to show him what I want from him. If he doesn't lunge perfectly the first time, I'm not worried. There's plenty of time for perfection. What I do want, however, is to be certain he's heading in the right direction. If he does something half right today, the chances are it will be 3/4 right tomorrow. The foal has learned to cooperate and to yield to me. He doesn't resent or fight anything I want to do with him. And now he's quite happy to follow me around the yard without a lead. I've taught him to think about what I want and to try for me rather than fight with me and look for a way out of every situation. I can now tie him up without any trouble. I've taught the horse to step forward whenever pressure is applied to the headstall. So whenever the foal moves back and the headstall tightens, he knows he only has to move forward to relieve the pressure. Before I tied him up, I have taught the horse a way out of any potential discomfort. No horse should ever be tied up before he has been taught to give to the headstall. He must be taught. He can't work it out for himself. If a horse fights when he is tied up, he will remember it and fight next time. You can't tell a horse to remember one part of a lesson and forget another.
There'll come a time in the horse's life where you'll want him to stand very still, to treat a cut, give him a needle for whatever reason. It's common practice to grab the horse's ears. This will have the effect of making the horse stand, but it'll also create a handling problem later on. Every time your hand comes near his ear, he'll be trying to get away. It's always better to use a nose twitch. When we tighten the twitch up, this will have a tendency to make the horse stand. So only tighten it up when you want him to stand. Loosen it off and give him a break from it. And then you can tighten it up again when it's needed.
Never think the foal's education is complete. It is in fact only beginning. Now I'll continue his education by rugging him. I'll fold the rug into a small blanket and then sit it on his withers. After leaving it a few seconds, I'll remove it. The foal will see the rug didn't harm him and he won't be alarmed when I place it on his back. At that point, I'll be able to unfold the rug along the length of his back. He has been taught that the way out of anything that worries him is to stand and bring his head to me. Therefore, he'll do this rather than trying to get away. It's important to do the leg straps up first, so that if something does go wrong, the rug will fall off and won't be tied around his neck. Never rug a horse for the first time and then let him go in the paddock. He may become frightened by the rug and gallop through a fence. Always leave him in the yard or in the stable. And never rug a horse with the idea that it will quieten him. If he is anxious, the rug will frighten him even more. Before you rug a horse, you must be confident. We don't want him to become frightened of the rug. Now I can introduce the horse to the saddle and girth. Why wait until he is older? If he learns to accept them now, you will have saved a lot of work later on. And if these lessons are conducted properly at this early stage, there won't be any problems when he is old enough to ride. Remember, it's only a question of teaching him. Whether the horse behaves well or badly is entirely up to you, and if a problem arises, you will have to rectify it. It's important to establish the rules and then make sure the horse knows them. When we are certain he knows the rules, he can be disciplined. Saddling and riding are more fully explained in my next video, a breakthrough for breaking in. After about 10 days reinforcing the earlier lessons, the young horse is now ready for an outing at the local show. He has been well educated at home, and this outing should be a fine experience for him. Since the foal has never been frightened or taught to fight, he won't pull back when he's tied to the truck. He's confident with people and expects no trouble, so he'll remain tied to the truck all day without any problems. Before taking the foal out, I made sure all his lessons had been properly learned. If he responds well at home, then it will be easy to give the foal a day out. But if there are handling problems at home, bringing the foal out will only increase them. He must always be ready for any situation we put him in. Training a horse is not about putting him into a situation he may not be able to handle and then trying to overcome it. You can clearly see it's not a question of my dominating the horse or asserting my authority over him. What I have done is show him that at all times it's easy and pleasant to try his best for me, even if I don't have a headstall on him. And when I handle his legs, he doesn't try to kick me or escape from me. My handling his legs doesn't worry him, so he sees no reason to try and get away. As you can see, I've won no fights with the horse. I've merely taught him to cooperate with me. When training a horse, the ultimate aim should be to build a solid relationship with the horse. A relationship based on mutual trust and understanding. If this goal is achieved at this early stage, we are well on our way to obtaining a superior performance from the horse, regardless of what it is we may want to do with him. Handling a horse in the manner I have illustrated on this video will give you a horse that will work with you and do his best for you at all times. You will have a tremendous advantage over the handler whose horse is always fighting him and trying to get out of working for him. What you have seen on this video can be achieved with any horse. There are no exceptions. It may be harder to train some horses than others, but this is only because of our training inabilities, not because of the horse's inability to learn.